First of all, welcome to this afternoon's Buy, Refurbish and Refinance Strategy Introduction Workshop with ourselves. Sorry, I'm not on the poster, but thank you very much for everyone taking the time and joining us this afternoon. A quick about today's agenda. We're going to start off at 12 o'clock. We're still waiting for a few more people to join us on this webinar. And just after 12 o'clock, we're going to hand it over to Dilapo, who's going to present to us the Buy, Refurbish and Refinance introduction. I think the presentation is going to go on for 1 hour, and just after 1 o'clock for half an hour, just slightly a bit longer than half an hour, we've got a live Q&A. So if you have any questions at any time of the presentation, please use the Q&A chat at the bottom. If you are watching on Facebook and you've got a question, feel free to drop this on Facebook as well. We've got someone in the back managing that, so your questions will be addressed. If not, you can also join us on the Zoom webinar as well. I believe the details have been shared on Facebook. In detail, well, as an introduction, we'll be going through what is Buy, Refurbish and Refinance strategy. Now, this method is quite interesting because not a lot of people have used it, so it would be great to find out who's actually used this method, who's familiar with this method, or who is here for the first time wanting to know more about it. Dilapa's going to go into a lot more detail in this introduction and talk to you about the whole life cycle of Buy, Refurbish and Refinance. Later on, as I said, this is an introduction. We will be explaining the strategy and how you can use it in a lot more detail, and we've actually set up some workshops for everybody in the month of August. So these are the dates. Please feel free to take a picture of these dates that we've got. It's going to start on Saturday, the 1st of August. The dates are just right over there. They will be streamed live on Zoom because of the current pandemic. We have a discount code as well. It does expire this weekend, so we are now taking bookings. You can purchase the tickets on Eventbrite. Don't worry about the ticket details. I will be sending them all out to everybody. If you prefer it by WhatsApp, text message or email, do let me know. But we do have live training in the month of August with Midas Property Group and with Dilapo as well. We will be going into a lot more detail. So this is just an introduction, guys. A couple of more dates for your calendar, really briefly. We've got an upcoming event on the 30th of July, our pre-auction event with Andrew Binstock, a very popular auctioneer. And we've got a couple of more entrepreneurs, and we've got Quasi, we've got Yasmin, a solicitor as well. So a date for your diary. Feel free to take pictures at any point. And just a quick update about Midas Property Group. So if you have joined our webinar before, I'm pretty sure you know who we are and what we do. But really quickly, these are some of the things that we are currently doing and have done in the past. Now, as a property sourcing company, we do a little bit more than property. So we have actually worked with councils in the past. We've actually got about 60 properties just outside of London that we have sourced for a couple of councils. We are in conversation with a couple of more London-based councils to find property not just in and around London but all over the UK. As you saw in the previous slide, we do pre-auction events as well. We do our own independent events. In fact, we had one last night with Simon Zucchi and with Dilapo, of course, extremely successful. All of these events currently are online, so if you want to know more details about these events, feel free to drop a message to me, but you should already be on the mailing list as well. So we had a hugely successful event last night with Simon, and we do virtual learning academies too. So we have got some amazing masterminds that we have done in the past. There's some pictures of some of the people that we have worked with. And like I mentioned before, we are currently working with some local authorities, London, like some councils as well. Over the years, we've actually acquired a huge database because of the networking that we do. We like networking. We find out a lot about our attendees who are investors and developers as well. So we've got a huge database of about 60,000 people. So if you have any deals, or if you have any off-market deals and you want to find out about some of the deals that we have got, feel free to message us, and we will happily put you on the mailing list. This little bit is for Sam, so I think Sam's going to talk at the end. But apart from that, I am going to let Lapa carry on. And this is an introduction to the buy, refurbish and refinance strategy workshop. So that's it from me. But just to mention once again, the chat has been disabled. So if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to put them in the Q&A drop box at the bottom. They are anonymous, so nobody else can see your questions apart from the panel members. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Artie, and thank you guys for joining on this introduction to the buy, refurbish, refinance, and repeat. And basically, this strategy is what I've used to build up my portfolio over the past 10 years. And the reason why I really am a big proponent of this strategy is because when I got into property, I actually got in with the mindset to flip. So it was more buy a discounted property, do it up. You know, I understood the fundamental principles of how you would buy a property, do it up, put it back on the market, and then sell on the property. But there were some key elements that I didn't fully understand, which when I look back on, I definitely lost money on the first couple of deals I did, just because I didn't fully appreciate some of the fundamentals that I'm going to go into today with this webinar. So to give some context, I'm going to share my screen now so we can get into the meat of the webinar. And so I like to call it this model, the SI.M.P.LE module, and it's how you can create staggering income in property in 6 simple steps. And it is basically us breaking down and distilling the buy, refurbish, refinance model into the different elements that then work up to creating the strategy. And before we go into it, it's very important that when you're thinking of building a portfolio, when you're thinking of getting into property, that you get the education. Because like I said, sometimes you feel like you can do it on your own, and you can, but there's some key elements that you're not fully aware of. There are different strategies, different ways of looking at things that until you know, like if you've not heard the term, you don't know what you don't know. And for me, I saw that happen in the early stages of my career, where I didn't necessarily think about some of these different strategies and how they were going to impact. And like I look back and I said before that there are some strategies that if I had known about, I would definitely have maximized. So getting the education is very important. Getting confident in using whatever education or whatever knowledge you've picked up is very important. And then getting on with it. So no point in just learning and going for all the different webinars, but then not putting them to practice. So it's very important that we're also putting these things to practice. And the whole point of breaking it down into the SI.M.P.LE model is to get rid of complicated property strategies. There are easier ways to make money in property. Yes, there are all these different strategies, but there are ways to distill it in a way that you can understand it and apply it. And that's the whole point of this seminar and the course that we offer. It's really breaking it down into simple steps that you can take, and then you can apply to your property journey. So for me, it's always important to have an idea of where people are in their property journey and what they're hoping to achieve. So are you looking, to build a portfolio? Are you looking for monthly recurring income? Are you looking potentially to quit your job? Some people are happy in their jobs and they want to build a property portfolio on the side income, but a lot of people are looking for a full transition where they want to be able to run their own businesses. And then if it's just for investment, or if you're trying to learn strategies to grow wealth. And this strategy actually ticks all of these boxes, because through it, you can build up a portfolio. I'm now relying on the monthly recurring income I get from my properties because of how I've been able to recycle the cash, because it's a very cyclical type of strategy that you just keep repeating. You find the right property and you keep repeating. And indeed, I've quit my job full-time in this business. And even just for investment, it's a good strategy to park your funds in and just continue to recycle. And we're talking about if you had your funds in the bank at 0% currently versus putting it in these strategies where you're almost even in the worst case scenario, you're looking at by 11% per annum. And this is when I say the worst case scenario. So, you know, it's a very strong strategy and definitely one that if you don't know about, should be actively seeking to apply it into your property journey. And then of course, fundamentally, why property? Why do we look to property as a form of investment? Because in terms of all the asset classes, I'm sure different people are aware of stocks and all these different strategies and all these different assets that you could park your money into, which I do have some funds in some of those strategies, but to be fair, bulk of my assets is in the asset class property, because first of all, we're on an island, so I know that, you know, there's a limited short supply of property, and therefore there's only one direction in which property prices go. And if you look at property prices historically, not to say that they haven't dipped, but they never dip to the previous dip. So they're constantly on an upward incline. Even the dips are higher than the last dip, and that is also on an incline. So it's just that when you're thinking about where you're parking funds, and I guess the reason why you're on this webinar is that you understand that property is a good source for you to park your investment. And then how much do you need to get started? So typically with this buy, refurbish, refinance model, you're looking anywhere, depending on where in the country you're investing, you're looking at about 30,000, 40,000 to start out by the time you add in the cost of refurbs and all of that. So, but if you're in London, then, you know, you are looking at considerably more. You're looking somewhere in the 70, 80, 90,000 to be able to start out. But, and then what strategy are you then tying with the buy, refurbish, refinance? Because you should have different exit strategies. I always say have exit scenarios planned out. So are you going to buy, refurbish, finance and hold on to the property for 5 to 7 years and then sell it? Or are you looking to just keep holding on that property in perpetuity, in which case you have to start thinking about sort of the tax implications of holding on to that property, and if you have to put in place inheritance tax strategies towards the back end. But these are all long-term proposals that you need to think about depending on what strategy you are applying with this model. Also, are you looking to combine it with serviced accommodation for that increased income, or are you looking to convert the property into a HMO? So it's really about what strategy are you going to use that suits you as a person and suits your investment criteria. And then back to exit strategy, understanding that your exit strategy is vital. You know, if you're going to sell it, then you need to understand and speak to tax officials, tax experts on how to best optimize your portfolio. Because once you follow the strategy over the next 10 years, you're very quickly going to realize, especially if you're going to operate, say, in a lower priced area somewhere in the Northeast, you'll be very, very quickly be able to replicate buying properties over and over. And within 10 years, you find that you have quite a bit of a portfolio, which then means that you need to really be looking at your tax optimization strategies. So it's just some of the key principles before we go into the model. Now, following the 6-step method, we've broken it down into source, increase, modify, present, let, and extract. So there's different elements form the overall buy, refurbish, and finance strategy. And as I said, it goes round in a cycle because you're sourcing a property, you're increasing the value, you modify that property, you present that property fit for purpose to the tenants that you're ideally wanting to let the property to, and then you extract the value at the end of the process. And then you start that process all over again. Now let's talk about sourcing. So the first step in this process is ensuring that you've selected the right property. So you're looking at some of the core fundamentals in selecting that property. You're looking at the location. Now, I'll come to a case study further down where I show you how in selecting the right location, you're able to uplift the value of the property, because when you're selecting a property, it's very important that you are able to add value right from the onset. onset. It's one of the fundamental principles of this buy, refurbish, refinance, is that you're able to, through the reconstruction of that property, either by changing the layout of the property, or maybe you've bought it at such a discounted value, or you've added an additional room or additional extension or loft, you've reconfigured that property so that you can extract the value later on down the line. And then you're also very, very, very cautious about the price and making sure that you're doing the right comparables, because when you buy the property at a certain price today, you have an idea of, okay, this is a strategy I'm going to apply to it. This is, I'm going to remodel the property. You need to be sure that the end valuation is going to be comparable, like for like, to properties in that area. And this is the thing with area dynamics. And so when one of the key parts of the course is where we talk about area analysis and how to make sure that you're not selecting a property on one street and then comparing a property on another street to find that they're completely different. Sometimes that really happens in London, where in an area, there's an area, part of Marylebone, good example, where you can very easily run into problems where you select a property. If you look at the end valuation, you would typically expect that that valuation is what you get for that property. But because it's just on a different street, just 2 streets off, you find that your comps will not, when the surveyor comes to value that property, that it will not meet the valuation you're looking for. So it's very important when you're doing area dynamics to be very careful about that. And that's what we look at when we're doing the sourcing of a property. And then the next step is the increase in the value. So I've said already that when you're selecting a property, you need to be sure that you've selected the right type of property, because what you're now looking to do next is to increase from the current value to a new value. And we're now not waiting for time to dictate the value of the property, where you buy a property, leave it as is and wait for, say, 10 years and then you've added the value. No, you're looking to add the value right from the onset. So you have a current value, you've gone to the market, compared, made sure that that property at that price is the right value to be paying for it, because you don't want to overpay for that property. But at the same time, you know the strategy that you have in mind that's going to force that value up, so that you now, within a couple of months, depending on what strategy, could range from 3 to 6 to 9 months, and even 2 years, depending on if you're going to go down the land route or whatever route you want to go. But in a simple instance, where you're like some of the properties that I'm going to, the case studies I'm going to show, where within 6 to 9 months, you've added new value to that property and you can extract that as further down the line. And then we come to modifying the property. And as part of the course, we go through step by step how you would then modify the layout of a property, how you would make sure that if you needed to get planning, if you needed to speak to building control, how you would then get all of those things in place to reconfigure the property. We talk about getting the consent to be able to modify the property internally if you're just going to do an internal refurb. And if it's going to be something external, how you work with the builders to make sure that you deliver the project at the right time, scope, and budget. And key principles to make sure that you work with the builders to be able to deliver on the project, because delays on this type of project impact on your end result. So imagine if you are buying within this time frame where we want to try and make sure we are able to do what we're able to buy within this sort of stamp duty holiday. If indeed you were taking on this property and you were going to add value, a good example is if you were looking to sell it. Let's say you were not actually looking to refinance and move on, you were looking to sell. Then you need to be sure that whoever is doing the internal refurbs can meet the deadline so that you can sell the property in timelines. So that's just a simple example of, even in today, how meeting the right deadlines would be impactful for your project. Now, when you now apply it to building your own portfolio, you want to make sure that whoever you're working with understands the scope of the project and gives you the right pricing for that scope. So making sure you don't go over budget, it's very vital, because it can really throw away your financials as well. And when I say modifying, you know, from a simplistic perspective, we're even just talking about creating a new layout, which this slide is showing, where you have a new bathroom, new kitchen, new bedroom, paint, open plan layout, and you have a new property, which can then be revalued. And then when we come to presenting the property, we're looking at understanding who your end tenant is and understanding your client profile. And we work towards, you not wanting to overspec on the property. So in some of the images, you can see they're really done up to really good high spec. And that depends on if you've decided you want to go down the HMO route and you want to apply your property to professional tenants who will appreciate and pay extra for good living, versus if you were going to a student environment and you wanted to make it fit for the student market, where you need to make sure that what you put in the property is durable, it's long lasting, and it can take a lot of high turnover. So having an appreciation of the strategy that you've applied to that property, who your end tenant is going to be, and making sure that you are not overspecking or underspecking. So we go through where you source this property. So where you source these the elements that go into the property. So we're even talking about units where you can find discounted furniture and all of those different elements that go into creating your property and what it looks like by the time you're done with it. And then we move into letting the property, so selecting the right tenant, where we're ensuring that the right tenant goes through each of the different, each of your own criteria for selecting tenants. And this doesn't matter whether you're actually outsourcing it out to agents. I always say that you should still have your agents send you the tenants that they're selecting, and make sure for yourself that those tenants are meeting your own criteria. So we work through the fundamental criteria, that the minimum criteria that tenants should have, so that you minimize voids and difficulties going forward. Because I've had different experiences in this space where, sometimes you're just in a hurry to get tenants in, but you're not thinking through the long-term ramifications of that action. So sort of making sure that if a tenant doesn't meet all of these different criteria, that you do not allow them into your property. You're kind of acting as the gatekeeper to make sure that the people that do end up in that property are people who are going to take care of that property, and more importantly, they're going to pay their rent. So going through the rigor, going through the identity of that person, making sure you have the right references, how much they earn, and the track record. Those are some of the elements that go into selecting the right tenants. And then we go through all of the different documentation and all of that, so you are in compliance, especially for some of the more complicated strategies like the HMO, service accommodation, where there are all sorts of compliance regulations around them. And then finally, and the most important, is extracting the value. So from the properties, really what you're trying to do is, you've gone through all of this exercise, going through all of the different steps to make sure that at the end you are extracting maximum value from that property. And it's talking about how do you remortgage that property. So first of all, there are different criteria and calculations that you employ when you're working with at the point where you're going to remortgage the property. So things like making sure that that property price, when you've added the value, is going to stack up from the mortgage lender's perspective in terms of the what they call the rental threshold. So where to make sure that the rental matches what they will be willing to give to you as the 75% loan to value of the property. So it's very, very critical that when you're looking to extract, of course, the golden apple and the golden litmus test is that you're able to extract 100% of the amount invested. And in one of the case studies that I'm going to show you, you'll see how you can almost get to 100% depending on the strategy that you employ. But with some of them, you will have, say, maybe 30,000 within it or 40,000, but that's fine, because ultimately you're making sure that whatever you're getting as rental income compensates for whatever is left in the deal. So if you have a cash element within that deal, it's being offset by the rental income, so that when you do your return on investment with the cash left in the deal, it still makes a lot of financial sense rather than that cash being in the bank. So it's really looking at extracting the maximum value from the property, how all of the different metrics that you need to use to make sure that you will achieve 75% loan to value on the end gross domestic, on the end valuation of that property. So, so just understanding that extracting the value is the fundamental. The reason why I've gone through all of this is to make sure that we've been able to extract the value from the property, and we've been able to add the value, extract it, and use, and we can move on to the next project. So to give an example of some of the case studies that we've employed. So I'll start with the simple. I call these deals like the bread and butter, very simple deals. They are not stressful at all. Within 6 months, you're in, you're out, and you've extracted the value. So we're looking at a 1-bed refurb in a desirable and up and coming area where you can immediately add value. So this is the before pictures, not in the worst state. I've definitely seen worse, but in a state that nobody can move in. Didn't even really have a functioning bathroom. So it's the purchase price of this property came in at 400,000, and that was a good price considering what other 1-beds were achieving at the time. But remember, I didn't necessarily care that the price was at a 1-bed price. I just don't want to overpay for it. So if, say for instance, it's sold at 450, then I would be less inclined to buy it, because I could easily just go straight, to the market and buy directly from an estate agent at a lower price. Keep in mind that this property was purchased in the auction. And then the project refurb costs was 30,000, and that's including furnishing and including everything to get it up to spec. And that is because I already knew when I was buying what my end goal was going to be. I knew I was going to turn it into a service accommodation property. So revalued after 5 months at 550, and I had the immediate uplift at 150,000 just for a simple refurb because I selected the right area. And by the way, this is not just a one-off. There's so many areas, especially when you're operating in London, where you immediately understand the area dynamics, that because it's close to a certain area or it's in a certain location, it has that ability to add in value the minute you do the reconfiguration internally, but it's very area specific. And then after I've converted it now into a service accommodation, with all of the furnishing, soft furnishing, and this is what I talk about presenting the property, because not only am I presenting it for my end clients who are going to take on the property and pay max value because I've done it up to spec, I'm also presenting the property for the valuation, the surveyor who's going to come and value the property and is going to put it at the top end of the valuation scale because it's presented nicely compared to all the other properties on the street. So developed as a comfortable luxury space that targeted towards service accommodation. And the total cash investment by the end of the deal was 160,000, remortgaged. And so at the new value, as I showed in the previous slide, of 550, at 75% loan to value, able to extract 412,000. Now, because I bought this property for 400,000, the original mortgage was 300,000. So I paid off that, and then the money released to invest was therefore 112,500. So there is money still left in, as I said, which I think comes to about 38 or 48,000. But that's fine because we have the rental, which is at 1,900, and when compared to the mortgage, which currently on this property is 1,200, there is a 700,000 buffer, which is the income, and more than compensates for the amount, the 40,000 odd that's left in the property. So that's a simple example. And then we come, and this project pretty much from the beginning, from the day I picked up the keys to the day I got it revalued and got the money in my bank, was 7 months. So it's, we started the process, it was delayed a bit, but then by the 7th month, funds are in the bank ready for another project. And then this project is in Neeson and was slightly bigger because we were reconfiguring the property into a 3-bedroom flat with an extension at the rear to compensate for the new kitchen and the new living room and extra bedroom that was going to be put in the end, at the end of the project. So looking at this auction, another auction purchase was £300,000, which was a good deal compared to other properties on the street. So I think other properties at the time were around sort of the 320. But the thing with this property that made it even more attractive was it already had planning approved for the rear extension. So that planning in of itself was added value. So, and the cost at 300 was a great value because of the planning attached to it. So refurb cost was slightly more expensive than a typical, what I call a typical deal, because of the additional extension that was put in, complete guts of the internal, stripped out all of the walls, and then reconfigure the property so that in 12 months, exactly, because that build took about 9 months, and then time to do all of the building control and all of the additional paperwork, then meant that it was revalued at 495, which was an uplift of 195 within 1 year. So again, this was almost to the day, 12 months from the day I picked up the keys to the day the funds were back in the account from the remortgage. And so very little money left in total cash investment in this deal, because it was a lower price point. So even though there was the £80,000 on top of it, total cash was still 170,000. Remortgage amount at the 75% loan to value came in at 371, and money released to invest after, like once the funds came back into the account, it was 160,000, meaning there was only 9,000 left in the project. And with the monthly rental at, because now it's a 3-bedroom, it was able to achieve much higher at 2,100 a month. So, you know, bought with planning, completed the rear extension, all of that done within 12 months, and almost extracted all of the amounts in it so we can move into the next project. So that's pretty much the way it works in principle, is that you find the right property, you add the value, and then you extract at the back end of the project. So, and you repeat the method and grow your portfolio. So once I understood the fundamental principles of doing this, then it's just something you just find the right property. And honestly, I don't move until I find the right property, because I know once I find the right property, then the value is in there, then I can move. I would rather not buy a property if it doesn't tick all of the different boxes to be able to extract the value. And I don't necessarily care about the size of the project, as long as the financials stack up and I know that I'll be extracting a lot of money, or if I'm not extracting my initial capital, I have enough left in that compensates by the ongoing rental income. So I've shown you what's possible. I've shown you how you can build up and scale up your property portfolio, even if you have the one, whether you have none, as long as you have that initial deposit, or you can joint venture with somebody who does. And that is another alternative, is that sometimes when you don't have the funds, some of the earlier projects that I did were joint venture projects. And once I understood how to do this, apply that to joint ventures, then you really have like a good formula to go forward to build a portfolio. And it's the quickest way, if you don't have funds, for you to be able to get on the property ladder. But if you have the funds, then even better. So back to the wealth principle again, get educated, get confident, and get on with it. So my whole thing is about getting active and going to find the deals that work. But to find the deals that work, you need to understand the elements that make up that deal. So we've put together, so I've worked with Sam and Artie, and we've put together the 6-step BRRR blueprint. And it's 6 modules going through each of the different elements that I just went through in more detail, and breaking down how you would source the property, the layout of the property you need to be looking at, whether it's a house. It works for houses, it works for flats, but there's specific layouts. And going through all of the different elements that we just went through in more detail. And the times that we've selected is suited to your busy schedule. We've looked at if people can make it on the weekends, or if they can make it on a weekday. And we have these different dates available. So we have August 1st and 5th. And we also have the masterclass dates, August 8th and the 12th. And that is for the 2 days where we split out 3 modules per day, and we go through in detail. And then with the 6 module course, breaking down each module. So we have sourcing the property, we have the area analysis, as I said, identifying the right area where this strategy works. And then identify eight different sources to find property. So I mentioned auctions, which is a primary way in which I source. But in addition to auctions, there are all these other ways you can also go to market to source property. And we cover those. And then identify which strategy works to meet your goals. Because as I said, some people will not go down the service accommodation route because it may be too time consuming and they don't have the time to do it. But there are other strategies that could work, or maybe they don't like the voice. The different strategies that you need to suit, you need to work out what works with your goals and what works with the property that you've sourced. And then selecting the right property with case studies. So with the case studies I showed you, I kind of glossed over how the financials, but in the course, I actually show you in terms of the layout, and I walk through how you would go through identifying the properties that have value within them. And then increasing value. So we're looking at deal analysis. So looking through spreadsheets and how you actually calculate. Remember, I kept talking about the value left in. So if you have funds left in, how you calculate the return on investment on that amount left in to make sure that, even from the onset, even if there's going to be 30,000 or 40,000 left in, this is how much I'm going to be making on that. And then the deal analysis, also, if you can extract everything out, how you can work out the numbers, the cost of the refurb, the cost of acquisitions, all of the different costs that go into buying a property. And then identifying how to increase the value in that property from the onset. And then we also look to maximize the value in the property. So specific strategies that help to maximize the value. And then we also look at reviewing the best layouts, like I said, and how to make sure that the layout, the property that you've picked, you've selected, works for the strategy that you want to employ in that area. So if you're looking at a HMO, then making sure you select the right property and reconfigure the right property so that you can maximize the income from your HMOs. And then we come to modifying the property again, where I've talked about building your match power team, and match actually works at the acronym that makes a good power team for success. And then we work out who you need and the best places to find them, and then how to qualify them, so that there's some core questions you ask everyone that you work with, and how you go about interviewing them to make sure you've qualified them to work on your project, and then contract and negotiating with them. And then module 4 goes over presenting the property. So how to assess the tenant profile on that property, how to present the property to maximize the rental value, and then the simple strategies to source and furnish to attract the right tenants or clients, depending on if you're going to go the service accommodation or relocation agent route. And then then we come to letting the property. Like I said previously, where you're assessing to make sure that you're pre-selecting the right tenant to stay at your property, targeting and where you source this tenant. So for some strategies, there are ideal platforms that you source these tenants from. We cover all of those places where you source tenants, the best places to source them. And then we also look through the overview of the deal cycle. So some people don't understand necessarily how you go through the entire lettings process. We cover all of that, and the points at which you need documentation throughout. And then we cover the best tools for managing tenants as well. So, and how to systemize your business going forward, because after a while, when you start to build, maybe when you have 1 or 2 properties, it's easy, but once you start to build up a portfolio, it becomes difficult, especially with the number of legislation around, say, fire safety and the electric certificates, gas certificates, all of those different documentation that you need to do. So systemizing your business for minimal stress. And then, of course, extracting the value, going through the different key metrics. You need to revalue the property, best practices to make sure you've extracted the value, the max value, and then ensuring that you have plan B strategies in case it doesn't match up. Then what do you do? How do you then repurpose that property? Do you want to then put it back on the market to sell, or just thinking through all the different options that you have? Because with property, you know, sometimes you have the best case scenario planned, but reality, especially as we're entering this season, there are different realities that you need to also be aware of. So we work through all of the different strategies and different realities and case studies so that you have an idea when you are faced with it in reality. And then I'm reviewing the financials as well to generate income on your project. So going through all of those different modules, so those are the 6-step blueprint to build up your portfolio. We then have a private members only WhatsApp group. And this is, I find that groups are really good for helping you to think through, because some questions you wouldn't have thought about, somebody else will ask. So, you know, it's making sure that we're all together, and if there are any questions, it's being addressed. And then, and as a bonus, we've added in addition to the 2 original modules and those dates that we have available, we're having a Q&A session where if there are any questions, you've gone through all of the material and you realize, I have a gap in knowledge here, I need to understand this a bit more, we're going to have a Q&A session for you to bring all the questions you have about property. And it doesn't only have to be about that, just generally property related questions that you have, we'll address them. And then we have a bonus one-to-one where for the first 5 people who sign up, we'll be doing a coaching session looking at your personal circumstance and then proposing how to build your portfolio going forward. So if you have a property already, how to extract the value and how to then roll it into multiple properties. And so the price that's listed is $1,997, which is an investment because, like I said, sometimes the mistakes you make when you don't know these strategies can end up being way more costly than that. But because of this webinar, and we have up until the 19th of July, we have our discount code that we're offering to people who have taken the time out to come to the webinar. We're offering the course at $750, and $750 is very, very good value, especially when you compare it to the content that you'll be getting, all of the support that you'll be getting along the way as well. And if you are looking to build your own portfolio, it's an amazing offer for you to start with. And you get a lot of information, you get quite a lot of sort of things broken down into their elements so that you can then take things forward. And so again, we go over, you get the 6-step blueprint, you get the private members only WhatsApp group where we respond to any questions you have. And then we have the Zoom members only question and answer session for any questions that you have coming off of the course that you need to be addressed. And then the one-to-one strategy session for the first 5 people. So, so if it's something you're interested in, and of course, bonus, so area and deal analysis with case studies. So we're going to go through different areas. So there are areas, like I mentioned, that really work in London. So I'm London specific. But once you understand the way that it works, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select different areas and I'll show you how some areas won't work and some areas will work. And you'll see the fundamental differences and how a certain area can meet all of these different elements and be the type of area you should kind of be focused on and building a portfolio around, versus other areas that sound like they would be good, but then when you look at the deal analysis and you break down the elements, you find out that it won't really work, it won't really stack up. So we'll go through that as part of the bonus as well. And then we understand the different funding sources because, and the fees associated with funding. Funding is one of the most critical parts of what makes or breaks this deal. And it's understanding how to source the funds for your projects, but then understanding some of the fees. So there's some very interesting products out there that will give you a lot more than you would know, normally to build, especially when it's a build or a development. However, understanding some of the costs that those fees come along with so that you know when you're working through what exactly the total amount will be for your deal. So to go back to the second project that I showed you, I actually had it on with development finance. But by the time we started to review all of the costs, they were going to give quite a lot. They were going to give about 90% of the build costs, which is quite a substantial amount. It means that I wouldn't have had to come out of pocket quite as much. But by the time we went through all of the different costs and the associated fees, I kind of backtracked and I said, no, I would just go with the normal lender. So understanding some of the fees and understanding that will help you in determining what funding sources to go with. Do you want to go with the regular buy-to-let, or do you want to go with bridging? Some of these will talk about the difference in the fees. And then refurbishment best practices as well. Remember when I was talking about your wanting to keep within time, budget, scope, and some of the best practices when working with builders to make sure you protect yourself. So I've had mentors and mentees that have gone ahead and done projects, and I've explained to them, you need to follow these steps very, very critically with the builders. And the results are always the same. If you don't follow those steps, you always repeat, especially if you're new, because builders they know when they're working with new people who are new in refurbishment and in development. And then reviewing the top templates required for success. So we'll go through all of the different, so we talked about deal analysis templates, and we'll talk about some of the other documentation you require for all of the different steps along the process. So these are just the bonuses. And if you are interested, you can log on to the Eventbrite to pay, or you could get in touch with RT and with RT or Sam to then agree how to go forward and pay. And it's pretty much, we're starting early in August, and it's going to be a very informative, and there's going to be a lot of information. I've had previous, I've run this workshop a number of times, and I've gotten very, very strong feedback on the content. So, you know, as far as content goes, you get enough to be able to start out and develop a good portfolio for your property business. So yes, Sam, if you're there, I've finished the presentation. And if there are any questions and answers, let me actually look through the questions to see if there's any.
Hi, that was amazing. Let me take my glasses off.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. That was a lot of content, a lot of detail, and that's just an introduction.
Exactly.
So we have now opened up the Q&A. If you guys have got any questions about anything that's been covered today, feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom. And like I mentioned before, all completely anonymous, so no one can, we don't know who the messages are from apart from us. So there's a couple of messages, a couple of questions. Would you like me to start them off?
Yes, please.
Okay. What is a deadline for the payment? That's from someone. Is this a payment details for the webinar? So if you're looking to purchase the tickets for $750, which is a discounted price, the deadline is, I believe, Sunday, the 19th of July. So you've got until the end of the weekend. I hope that helps. Yeah. Okay, there's another question for you. Can you please explain what steps you are taking with builders and what do you do to protect yourself? Very good question, that is.
Yes, so that is part of what we cover in the course. But one, I'll give you, let me see, there's one I would say that's very important. So this is where it comes to the funds. And this, I don't know why it trips people up quite a lot, but I think sometimes builders put pressure on when you're new in building. So they always put pressure that they need a lot of money up front, right? And indeed they don't. So typically they have their labor staff, the laborers that they need to pay. And then most of the other things that they need to acquire is on credit, because even I, as a developer, has a lot of access to credit, and it's usually 30 days, 90 days credit, right? So a lot of builders will always be insisting for a large upfront payment, about half of the amount of the bill. And so I give you for free that do not, if they want to walk, let them walk. But under no circumstances the way to do it actually is to work out a schedule. And another thing that they do is they'll have maybe like 4-week timeline, and then they split the amount across the 4 weeks. Never do that. So it's better to work within the scope of the project. So you tie the builder to delivery and pay him based on that. So, and we walk through, I'll show you in the course how you would prepare the scope according to the duration. So a lot of times the builders will do that actually. You can get the builders to prepare the work scope according to the duration, and then you both agree the payment is based on the delivery. So we'll work through, I'll show you an example of a scope, a work scope that a builder has given me, and how we work through and inserted the payment dates. And the great thing about that is if he hasn't met those dates, then he doesn't get paid the full amount. We do a prorated amount. So that protects you from getting, so that's just one of the ways to work with the builder. But I have other strategies that I put in place to make sure that I'm protected at all times when I'm working with builders. So
that's very good actually, and that's something that if I was to start new, I wouldn't consider that yes, builders do have credit.
Yeah.
And we don't think like that, so that's really good, and you're going to go into more detail in the modules. I hope that's answered your question. There's another question, if you can share some of your recent projects. So
yes, so the last two are the two that I shared. So those two literally finished. So one of them I picked up the year before, and we did the project throughout last year and then completed in January of this year. The second one was the first project that I showed, which is the one that completed literally just before the lockdown. So so during the lockdown, I was searching, I've been looking, but the problem, I don't know if any of you is in the market right now, the property prices they're just crazy. So either it's the pent up demand from having been in during the lockdown, or there's not enough stock in the market. But I have definitely struggled over the last 2 or 3 months to find anything that met my criteria. And this is what, if you were on the call yesterday, on the webinar yesterday, I said, and this is the thing as property developers, is to really have that patience until you find the deal. You know, like there's always this constant pressure, you want to deploy funds into something. You need to be thinking about the environment, you know, thinking about your business strategy, and thinking about, these are the fundamental principles with which I will never buy a property unless it meets these criteria, and I won't. So until I find it, I'm not. So currently 0 projects, but I still am managing the existing portfolio I have anyway, because I do all of that still hands-on. So, and looking. So if anyone has any projects that meet my criteria, I'm in the market. So
brilliant. There's another one. Is this recorded? Yes, it is recorded. We will send the link out to you guys, and if you can share the slideshow. So it's from the same person. So this is recorded, and you should be able to rerun the slideshow again. That's all the questions we have at the moment. I'm going to click through them. If anyone's got any more questions, feel free to ask away. If you want to have a look at that, Dalapa, while I have a quick look on Facebook for any questions, because we are currently live on Facebook. So I'll let you have a quick browse through that. Bear with me.
Let me stop sharing, go back into here. Okay.
Really appreciate everyone's time today.
Yes, so there's a question here that says, your company incorporated end of 2018. So my company is JD Investment Management. That's the core, that's the business that started out. I started branding as Citygate. Although I've been branding Citygate for a while, I purchased Citygate Homes and Citygate Property Development 2 years ago. So actually Citygate Homes is even more recent. Citygate Homes is probably earlier this year. And Citygate Property Development is 2018. So just to give, but if you check JD Investment Management Limited, then you'll see that we've been in existence since 2010.
Brilliant.
And I have all sorts of different companies as well. Properties purchased in my name, properties purchased in different companies. So as we'll discuss when we're going through the projects, that sometimes when you're, especially because of Section 24 and some of this new legislation, you find that with when you're buying property, that you need to be creating entities for your properties. So because you're going to need to create, your accountant's going to need to be able to look at each property and be able to do all the financials on that property as an entity on its own. An additional tip I'll say is sometimes when you have a mortgage company that is going to, so when you're buying a property in the corporate, the mortgage companies, the lender is going to want a debenture on that company. And it's going to want a personal guarantee from you as well on that company. So one of the key things is that when you're buying a property, you also have to be thinking about who is the existing mortgage lender on my existing portfolio. And if it's a different one, then you have to create a different company for that property. So just to let you know how we kind of structure it in the business.
Brilliant. You've got a lot of great presentation comments on Facebook, so you do something wonderful there. Another question for the payment. Yes, if you would like to join the webinar, we have a special discount code. So I can see it all properly here. We have a special discount code. It does, it's only valid until midnight on Sunday the 19th. So yes, after that, the prices are going to go back up again. But we do have a special discount code and it does expire on the 19th of July. Just going back to the questions again. Thank you so much for your questions. Is it easy to find properties that will give you a high yield often?
So I wouldn't say it's the easiest, but I've done it pretty much, I guess, consistently. So you have to be constantly in the market, and you can't, what I found is increasingly you can't just have one location. So yeah. I tended to have my gold mine area, which was northwest and sort of going into West London as well. Sometimes southeast, but I find that if you focus too much on an area because it's worked for you, sometimes that can slow your property journey down. So I say sometimes it's better actually to just follow the money. So in that case, what you're doing is you're looking for areas, and you're not going to be, it really is a personal choice, right? So I have decided I want to invest in London for my own personal circumstances. Some people are happy to go as far as Manchester, some people are happy to go as far as, Birmingham, and that's fine. And I have considered that as a strategy as well. But for me, I just prefer access, right? Because that's just my own strategy. So if you're willing to step outside of London and go further out, then you can find properties that yield, especially when you're going to tie to other strategies like HMOs or service accommodation. Those really have very strong high yields, and it means that you're able to offer stronger prices. When you find a property that works and you've done your valuation, it means you're not afraid to go into full asking. If you find a property with an estate agent, you won't be trying to haggle because you found the right property and you're able to make the yields on it. So yeah, so you can't just be too limited in your view as to where you want to source property.
That's something that a lot of people say, isn't it? Follow the money, and I guess that's true. So thank you. Should you set up a company? What type, and what is a mortgage company? That's an interesting one.
Okay, so yes, like I said, usually you will have to set up a company per property you buy, especially in this new dispensation of Section 24. Previously, when I actually bought in my name, and it was therefore easier to keep track because everything is in your name, and then your accountant could then just do all your financials at the end of the year based on that. But since things changed, it became more tax efficient to have it set up in a company. So if you don't already have a property and you don't necessarily have a high income, then you can still keep it in your name for maybe the first one or two properties. But if you're future planning and you're going to end up building a portfolio in using the strategy we've discussed, then it makes sense that from the onset, maybe you buy your first property. If you don't have one, buy the first property in your name because you get all of the advantages of a first-time buyer and all of that. But then from the second property, you pretty much just put it in a company. Now, like I said, if say, for instance, you find that the mortgage works is going to be an ongoing lender, then you can keep within the same properties within the same structure. But the minute you find that you have another lender, then it's going to almost it's going to force you to create another company. But it's fine because accountants are now used to managing multiple companies under one umbrella. And then what type of company? Usually it's a limited company, but please, this advice is completely, you need to check with the personal advisor, either a tax advisor or an accountant, because it's very, very personal. It's very specific to your current situation. So there are different types of companies. You could get partnership companies, which some accountants recommend, but I say go very cautiously if you're going to go down the partnership route. And then limited is usually what most people use, but I would say ask your accountant about that. And then what is a mortgage company? It's usually a lender that will provide most of the funding that goes towards purchasing a property. And you have different types of mortgage companies, which we'll talk about in the course where I talk about the different funding sources. Now, what's important about mortgage and using mortgage as to buy property is that really the fundamentals only make sense in property investing when you have them providing 75% of the property purchase. If you were to buy that same property in cash, you find that your yields are rubbish. They're like 1 or 2%. But if you've got a mortgage, then you see the yields really, we're now talking about the 11, 12, 13% yields. And even there's some areas where you get like up to 20% yields. So yeah.
Right, okay. There's a question on auction. Would you advise that I buy a property on auction which has a natural ground subsidence?
So natural ground subsidence, so this is a question that definitely needs to go towards somebody structural and a surveyor. But what I would say is if the subsidence is on the property itself, then for me, it's a no-go area, because the cost of sorting out the subsidence issues on a property will be exorbitant, number one. Number two is that mortgage companies don't touch. Also, you have to find a specialist lender who's probably going to be very expensive to cover the mortgage element. Most typical lenders will not go towards any properties that have subsidence, but there are lenders that will. So, so if it's a property you really want and you really want to proceed with, then number one advice is to get a surveyor to look at it and advise you on the type of subsidence it is and whether it's one that would be critical to the structure of the building. If not, if it's something that is not too critical, then you can proceed. But definitely, if it's in auction, then what I would suggest, which I have done, is identify the lender you want to go with and get them to instruct their valuer. You know, you're going to spend money on it. So maybe you'll end up spending like about $550 or whatever the value of the property is, depending, but it's going to be worth it. So that lender, you get that lender to value, so they will send their own valuer. And if that valuer comes back and says, it's a go, we're happy to lend on it, then you can proceed with the auction. But this is the type of property I'd say you need to spend that money up front before you go into the auction. And it might end up being that you don't even win the property at the auction, but you can't bid on it without. So it's kind of like a catch-22. So yeah, so that's my suggestion.
Would you need to have a structural engineer in place before as well, or not?
No, so you could, exactly, so either or. So either, I prefer the second alternative. If you can get the lender you're going to use for the property, maybe you already have an agreement in principle. If you can get that lender to send a surveyor, you know, even if you have to pay a little bit more, get them to go and value it, to make sure, if you really, really, really want that property, to make sure that they will lend on it, then at least when you're going into your auction, you'll have two things. You'll have the consent that they've seen the property and they're going to go ahead with it. And number two, you will know what the max is that they're going to lend to you. So when you're in the auction, you know what your max is. And if it goes beyond that, then, you know, you can't proceed with it.
Brilliant, awesome. I hope that question helps. Okay, I've got loads more questions here actually. Right, awesome presentation, very informative, thank you very much. In terms of finance, what do you look for in core investors? Are there minimums, types of partners, etc.?
Okay, so finance comes in two forms. So we have the mortgage finance, and then we have the investor finance. So these are sort of private funding. And for private funding, I say typically it depends on the project. So if it's a project in which, remember, we're always looking at the valuation at the end. So if it's a project where there's a lot of value in it, then you can have, I think you can have up to 4 people on the deed. So if all the partners decide that they want to be on the mortgage deed, you can have up to 4 partners on there. If you can also come up with a different arrangement where the partners are not all listed on there and they just have like an offline agreement. It's a legal agreement, but they're not on any of the paperwork, but they have a legal agreement that says they have a percentage. Typically, I usually will do max of 2 per property, because by the time you start going, because of the size of projects that I do, I don't typically do the large scale projects. So because of the type of projects that I do, by the time we start getting to 3 or 4 people, then the amount of return on investment starts to look kind of measly for the amount that you're investing. So if it's 2 people, if it's 3 people, it still works, but it really is about the project. So now that I'm looking to try and do bigger projects, then I will be trying to get more partners involved, because then I know there's more scope in the deal for more partners. So for sure. So that's a good question. There are no minimums. You can have, as far as investors go, there's a good saying that you should have maybe 3 investors at any point in time that you're offering deals to. So if you have people who you've spoken to and you've kind of pre-arranged with them that, look, if I bring a deal you like, so like the first few investors that I had, that was the way we worked. I would find a deal, show it to them. If they were interested, then they took in a stake in the deal, and we made our own agreements. And then if they weren't interested, I just moved on to the next partner or to the next investor.
All right, that's really good to know. Right, we've got loads of questions about the event. I'm going to address them all in one go. This is from someone. I don't have good credit score. Does this mean I can't get into buying property, or will the interest be so high it won't be worth it? Is there a way around this?
Yeah, so the thing with credit score is, if you don't have one, and by the way, everyone has a credit score, whether it's high or low. So you need to go, first of all, and go and find out what your credit score is. So if you don't have any credit whatsoever, then you have to start there, because in a sense, you're expecting a bank to give you £200,000, or even if it's £100,000, but you haven't even been able to demonstrate that you can actually use £5,000 efficiently. So I always say you have to start with opening at least 1 credit card, use it for a while, so that they can build up a track record and know that you can pay back on the credit card and you can manage your funding, and that you're a responsible, credit-worthy candidate. Before then, they start committing funds like even 50K, 100K towards you to manage. So is there any support out there without interest?
So sorry, going back to this question, he's actually asked if because he hasn't got a good credit score.
Oh, I see.
Credit score is completely different to your credit report. So you may think you may not have good credit score, but you also got to check your report, because you may have had bad credit in the past. But they also check your bad credit to make sure you managed it correctly and why you had the bad credit score as well. So it's always advisable to get a double check. I know there's a lot of credit score companies out there that combine everything for the past couple of years. So they also look at how good you are at managing bad credit. I kind of hope that makes sense for those who understand, but yeah.
Just the last point to make is that you should speak to a broker. Don't do anything with your credit until you've spoken to a broker, and make the plan with the broker. So I had a podcast recently and I talked to a broker about that, and he said his first ever client, that's what happened. At the point where he met her, she didn't have good credit, but then they made a 6-month plan. And that 6 months, she just needed to abide by all the things he told her. And in 6 months, she could buy a property. So it's not about you having a poor score today. It's about your future planning. So make sure you speak to a broker, get that broker to work out a plan of how your credit is going to work for the minimum requirement for a lender, and then work towards that, and you can get your property.
Brilliant. I hope that question helps, but definitely speak to someone about that. Did you have a solicitor from the word go?
Yeah, so you can, it depends. So if you're buying normally, like you're going to an estate agent, then you don't need a solicitor until the point where you make the offer. So where you're still viewing properties and all that, you don't need an estate agent. Sorry, you don't need a solicitor. The point where you put in the offer, they're going to want to know the lawyer, and they're going to want to know all of that information. So, so it's important that at that point, you know who your solicitor is.
Brilliant. Okay, got a lot of questions. Thank you, guys. I'm glad you're finding this webinar really useful. Can you confirm how to identify unmortgageable properties?
Yes, so good question. And I actually cover that in an auction course that I run, where I talk about all of the different elements. I think there are about 8 different qualities that a property has that makes it unmortgageable. And I can give you one, which is...
I think I know some of them, but not all of them.
Yes, so one of them is if it doesn't have a functioning bathroom and a functioning kitchen, then it's not mortgageable. So lots
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, so if it doesn't have a functioning kitchen or bathroom, so maybe like something has been completely ripped out, or
functioning would basically, is that connected to water supply or just?
No, like you walk in, and not about not being connected, that they know you can connect that. I mean, you walk in and maybe the sink is demolished or something, like, so it's not functioning, or the bathtub has been removed.
Wow, so that classifies as not functioning.
Not functioning.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't have facilities for somebody to move in. So it's something called, it's not habitable. So if it's not habitable, it's not mortgageable for most traditional lenders. But then bridging finances, and that's what we cover in the course as well, bridging and all those types of other more creative lenders will lend on the property because they know you're just going to fix it anyway. So
yeah, so you could get, in essence, you could get a bridging company for about 6 months, for example, until you sort of made your property mortgageable, and then switch it around basically.
Exactly.
Okay. So there's ways around it, right? Okay, are you going to, so that's one of the ways. Any other ways you want to share with us, or are we leaving this until the actual workshop?
I'll give you one for free.
All right, awesome. Okay, I've got more questions coming through. How can you advise on the best way to find a good broker that understands your situation and goals and isn't out for himself or herself?
Well, I always find multiple brokers. So, so I have 2 or 3 brokers that I work with, and I have some tips as well with them. But one of the things is you'll find that they have varying rates, they have varying lenders, and it's very important to find out the relationship that those brokers have with the lenders, because sometimes, even though it might be to their own interest, it also is to your interest, because sometimes they have such a good relationship with the underwriters, with the companies or the lenders, that they're able to overcome some issues sometimes that maybe a lender would have with your application. So it's not all the time that them having a good relationship that suits them doesn't necessarily suit you, but the best way to compare is by checking with multiple brokers to make sure that you're getting the best deal, so that even if it's suiting them, you know that it's still the best deal out there in the market anyway. So that's my own suggestion.
Would you also look at reviews? Just have a look at the testimonials, reviews. Is that another good way of finding a broker?
I guess on Google, some of them make the extra effort, but I know for a fact that I've used very good brokers that didn't have any Google presence. So, you know, it's really down to the mortgage rates. I don't necessarily care about the brokers per se. I'm more interested in the deals that they're bringing and that they're able to push through the deals. So there are some brokers that I use that are not the best because of their processes and they're extremely slow, but they have the best deals in the market. They have the cheapest rates. And so I just abide by them. And then there's some others that I will use because even though they're more expensive, they'll get the deals through quicker. They get my more complex deals through quicker. So it really is about what you're looking for at that time.
All right, brilliant. Oh, I love this comment. Thank you very much. Great session. Good to see women in control. I love that comment. Thank you very much. I think that's made my week. Okay, I love this question too. How do you overcome the fear of property investment? Love it. Thank you. So, how do you do that?
It's a real fear, it's true. And I know when I got in, there was that, but you know, there's a term called do it scared. You just have to overcome that fear and do it. So as long as you see, and it's one of the reasons why I was able to quit my job, even though my boss was like, yeah, I'm not sure this is a good idea 10 years ago. And I knew then it was a good idea because the fundamentals work. I don't take risks. I only take educated risks. So I already had assessed that with this amount, I should be able to buy this, and I should be able to refinance and do this, or I should be able to sell and do this, and I should be able to cope. Right? So I think what makes you go ahead and do it is when you've done all of the analysis, you've done all of the paperwork, you've crossed your I's and you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's, so that when you're taking that step, you've done all of the necessary work leading up to it. So you're scared, but you're then reliant on the fact that you've done your homework. So it's very important to make sure that the deal works. If you're going to buy a property, let's say you're buying a property at 200K, you've done the analysis, you found that you can refurbish it and then you can put it back on the market for 350, then you'll be scared doing it, but it's going to end, you're going to get the end value. So throughout the process is scary the first time, but once you've overcome it, then, you're in business, and doing the second one then becomes easier, but you have to start.
So somebody asked earlier on in the questions about, are you offering support during the workshop? And I guess with the workshop that we are offering as well, you are going to be sharing a little bit of this problem that you've had faced as well. So you'll be able to help the attendees as well about if they have any concerns about properties and anxiety and how to overcome this, buying and selling, you'll be able to offer that support, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it's specific, right? So it's personal. So it's just understanding what it is that's giving that fear. Once you've done all the paperwork and done all your analysis, then that fear will be minimized greatly. And then if they're still remaining, then there's other things that kind of need to be worked on as well. So,
will you be offering a little bit of that support for them during the workshop?
Part of the Q&A, which is the additional support to help with any questions and any issues that you might have while you're reviewing the course content. But then following that, we do have mentorship, sort of ongoing monthly mentorship. So we can always discuss that once you've done the course, once you're happy with the entire process, then we can discuss any ongoing mentorship.
Oh, brilliant, amazing. Can I BRRR my residential property, and if so, how?
So your residential property, of course you can. With your residential property, depends on what your deposit is. So, and this is a very key factor. So if you've only gone for the minimum, because realize that when investors are doing BRRR, is because they're depositing 25 and sometimes 30% of the value. Maybe on a good chance, they're probably doing 15%, but anywhere from 15 to 30% of the value of the property is the deposit. So if you can find a way to recycle that deposit, then you're building up a property, because, imagine a deposit of 25% on a 400K property, that's 100K. So it means that if you can extract 100K out, then you can buy another one and buy another one. If you're buying a property at 5 or 10%, then if you've added value, good, but are you adding enough to be able to extract, and then because you're only putting 5 or 10%, if you buy it, let's say you bought a 300K property, that's 30K. Even if you were able to extract all of that 30K, then the next project, which then isn't qualifying as a personal buy, is now a buy-to-let, you're going to need to make up the difference. So you'll be able to extract some money, but you might not be able to extract enough to move into another project. So it's just really about what you've done to add value and how much value you've added versus how much deposit that you've put in originally. So yeah, but it's very much a deal by deal. So unless I see the pricing on that, your residential property and the amount that you've put in as a deposit is going to help me to be able to know whether you can extract enough. You will be able to extract some, but how much will depend on the deposit.
All right, brilliant. I'm just going to go scroll through because I think we've got time for one more question before we wrap up. I'm just trying to see if there's anything that we've left out. Guys, feel free to message us with, I think, one more question we can squeeze in, right?
Yes.
Just having a look through. I think we missed this one. How do you ensure that you always have tenants? That's an awesome question. Even I would love to know that.
Well, there's no way to guarantee but I think that having a property that is nicely styled and nicely set up means that at least you're at the top of the list when it comes to selecting property. So remember, the property I had selected, the second one that dressed it all up, is because I knew it was going to be student accommodation. So I need the pictures to constantly be attracting guests to that property. Now, when we're talking about tenants, that type of property for a typical tenant will be fine, because most properties they're looking at are probably empty or sparsely done, right? So if they're coming in and it already looks like home, then chances are you'll rent it out quicker. However, there may be no need to spend that much. It's just to make the property look nice, and and then you can guarantee that at least you'll be able to get tenants in, and then putting it on the right platforms as well to make sure you can get the right tenant.
Awesome, brilliant. I think we're going to leave it there with all the questions. Thank you very much for answering them. Right, just to wrap up, thank you very much for this introduction, which is, I think, more than an introduction actually, because you gave so much content away. I've certainly learned something new once again, and I'm really happy that I was here. Loved all the questions that came through, but we do have the workshop that we are offering, and it starts on Saturday the 1st of August, and for those who can't commit on the weekends, we do have a weekday one as well. They're on for about 2.5 hours. A lot of content is covered, some great modules as well, and if you think this was a lot, we're going into a lot more detail as well, and you really will learn a lot more. We do have a discounted rate at the moment, which does expire on the 19th of July. If anyone can't pay for the Eventbrite tickets, if you really want to make most of the discounted rate and you just haven't got around to making the payment by the 19th, then message us. I'm sure we can figure out a way of giving you guys an extended discount or early bird special for a couple more days. I'm sure we can do that for you. So we will message you the details for the Eventbrite where you can purchase the tickets. And if you've got any questions about that, let us know. But yes, so the early bird special will be expiring midnight on Sunday. If you can't make the payment and you really want to attend the course, then just drop us a message. I'm sure we'll be able to honor a discount for a few more days. So we've got Saturday the 1st of August, the 5th of August, the 8th of August, and I'm pretty sure it's the 12th of August as well, during the day and in the evening as well. And that is it, really, isn't it? It's just been really exciting, and I can't wait for the workshop, really. Really, really exciting. So this session is recorded. You will be able to download it from our YouTube channel as well. So I will be providing you with all the details on that. And anything else to add? I think it's been a great session.
Thank you so much for attending and for being part of this. So I hope to see you during the workshop. So.
Absolutely. If you guys have any additional questions, then you know our details. You can also message us at any time, give us a call, be happy to address them. But I think it was a fantastic session, so thank you very much for your time and your effort. To all the attendees as well who took their time out on a Friday afternoon. I know it's a beautiful day outside as well, so thank you very much for that, and the questions too. So yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up, because I know we're pretty tight for time, and a lot of thank yous coming through as well. So that's from the attendees. So thank you very much for those messages. Excellent. Right, we're going to leave it there. So we're going to be ending this Zoom session in the next couple of seconds, and thank you guys for tuning in. Brilliant.